Hi, my name is Robin Wong, and I want to talk about the Olympus 5-axis image stabilization. Olympus revolutionized the mirrorless camera system by introducing the OMD EM5 back in 2012. In that camera, Olympus included a new feature called the 5-axis image stabilization. Over the years and over several iterations of newer cameras from Olympus, the 5-axis image stabilization has been improved drastically. In this video, I want to explore what 5-axis image stabilization is, what benefits you get when you shoot with 5-axis image stabilization, and some terminologies like 5 stops compensation or 5-axis sync IS, which Olympus has introduced. Let's get right into it. Image stabilization is not a new feature. It has been included in a lot of cameras, in high-end DSLRs to low-end compact point-and-shoot cameras. It is either lens-based or image sensor-based. When we shoot with a camera, no matter how steady we think we are, as long as it is handheld, there is a small movement that we cannot prevent. We are not tripods, we are humans after all. And that tiny movement, when we press the shutter button, is sufficient to cause some shake in the image. And in some situations, that shake is sufficient to cause a blur photograph. So no matter how many megapixels you have in your camera, if you have 100 megapixels, the pixels are useless if there is camera shake. So image stabilization is very important to guarantee a sharp, handheld images from any camera. Of course, this doesn't apply if you use tripod to shoot most of the time. So what is 5-axis image stabilization and how is it different from any other types of stabilization out there? The most common stabilization options out there available are 2 axes. And these 2 axes are yaw and pitch. Yaw movements are like this. It goes around this axis, and pitch is this way. So the yaw and pitch are the most commonly available image stabilization system, either lens-based or sensor-based in most camera systems out there. Now that's just 2 axes, right? Yaw and pitch. So when we click the shutter button, there's this motion as well as we turn the camera this way. And this is actually roll, right? Roll. So we have yaw, pitch, and roll, rolling down this way, and that's the 3rd axis. And finally, the 4th and 5th axis is vertical translation, up and down movement, and horizontal translation, left and right movement. The up and down, left and right movements are more obvious when we shoot close-up subjects or macro. The up, down, and left, right movements are also very noticeable and can make a big of a difference when we shoot video. So there you go, the total of 5-axis image stabilization from Olympus: yaw, pitch, roll, vertical translation, and horizontal translation. So how does the camera compensate for the camera movements? There is a gyro sensor built into the camera to detect the movements. Now this gyro sensor is so sensitive and so fast that once the movement is detected, it will send a signal to the camera's processor. Then the processor will tell the stabilization to quickly compensate for the movement. So if we move the camera to this direction, then the stabilization will compensate it the opposite way. And this works for all the 5-axis movements that we have just mentioned. The image sensor in the camera is always free floating. When we turn off the camera, if we shake the camera, you can actually feel there is something rattling inside the camera. Don't panic, that is the image sensor that's freely moving. But once we turn on the camera and when we try to shake the camera, because the 5-axis image stabilization is now working, it will hold the image sensor in place and it no longer rattles. So how does the camera keep the image sensor in place? Using very powerful magnets, of course. The science beyond that, it goes further to explain how everything works. I don't have it, I don't know how it works. I'm a photographer, I don't make cameras. So what does it mean when a camera company claims that the effectiveness of image stabilization is up to, say, 5 stops of shutter speed compensation? Now, typically, the rule of thumb when we want to mitigate any handshake when we hold a camera, shooting, fully handheld with no additional support, right? The minimum shutter speed is 1/4 focal length. Say that I'm using a 50mm lens, so the minimum shutter speed that I should be using to make sure that I don't have any camera shake is 1/50. Now, when I say that there is a 2-stop of image stabilization compensation, when the image stabilization is turned on, it will help to stabilize my hand holding when I shoot with the camera. That means, instead of shooting at 1/50th of a shutter speed, I can go down to 2 stops of shutter speed, stretching it from 1/50 to 1/25, 1 stop, and 2 stops, 1/12.5. So as long as I shoot at about 1/15 of a shutter speed, when I have 2 stops of stabilization using a 50mm lens, I should be perfectly fine. Olympus claims that with the EM1 Mark II, there is 5.5 stops effective shutter speed compensation with the 5-axis image stabilization. You can go to the video here, which I've done previously, to prove that yes, the 5.5 stops is actually quite effective in real-life shooting conditions. However, do bear in mind that this effectiveness is measured based on a SIPA testing standards. And SIPA testing is only measuring 2 axes, which is the yaw and pitch. So yes, the SIPA testing is only effectively measuring the 2 axes working yaw and pitch on the Olympus camera. It doesn't measure all the 5 axes working together, which means that in actual practical situation, the 5-axis image stabilization is a lot more effective than what has been claimed by the SIPA testing standards. Olympus has improved the image stabilization for every generation of their cameras. In the Olympus EM1 Mark II, we have 5.5 stops image stabilization effectiveness. When we come to EM1X, we get 7 stops image stabilization effectiveness. That is insane. Olympus claimed that in order to improve the image stabilization, they have to use a much more sensitive gyro sensor to detect the movement 5 times faster. You heard it right, in the EM1X, the sensor actually can detect movements 5 times faster in comparison to this EM1 Mark II. That's why the stabilization works much more effectively. If you have the 12-100 Pro lens or the 300 f4 Pro lens from Olympus, these lenses has image stabilization built inside the lens itself, working separately from the camera. If you pair this 12-100 or the 300mm lens on certain Olympus cameras such as EM1X, EM1 Mark II, the Pan-F, the old EM1 and EM5 Mark II, you get 5-axis sync IS. So instead of getting 5.5 stop stabilization on the EM1 Mark II, working together the image stabilization from the lens and the body, we get 5-axis sync IS, resulting in 6.5 stops image stabilization effectiveness. But a lot of people never asked, what happens when we use the 12-100mm lens on non-5-axis sync IS compatible Olympus bodies? What do you think will happen? The correct answer is the image stabilization in the body will be switched off and you'll be utilizing the image stabilization from the lens itself. Olympus claims that the image stabilization built into the 12-100 Pro lens has 5 stops shutter speed compensation effectiveness. That's right, the lens itself, the IS in this lens itself has 5 stops image stabilization effectiveness. Therefore, it makes sense that when you use it on the lower-level Olympus cameras, such as the EM10 Mark III or the EPL9, the in-body image stabilization will be turned off. And when you take a photograph, the image stabilization will be fully utilized on the one in the lens itself. Now, when we turn on and off image stabilization, there is no option to choose whether to use the body or the lens. It has been decided for you. No, you cannot selectively choose to use the lens or the body. So this is what happens. When you use the EM1 Mark II, EM1, EM5 Mark II, Pan-F or EM1X, you will have the full 5-axis sync IS utilizing both the camera's 5-axis image stabilization in body working together with the lens image stabilization, giving you 5-axis sync image stabilization. Now when we use this lens on a non-5-axis sync IS compatible bodies, you will only get to use the lens IS and the body IS is disabled. Not many people know about this information. Another important benefit I want to talk about with the image stabilization is that when we shoot with very long lens, zooming into the telephoto range, say using the 40 to 150mm lens or the 300 Pro lens, going all the way to the far end of the lens, the image is usually very shaky. Or when we shoot macro, when we go close up, that's when we get a very shaky preview either on the EVF or the camera LCD screen. With the image stabilization turned on, it actually stabilizes your EVF view or the live view on the LCD screen while you are shooting. It actually gives a much smoother and comfortable viewing experience. I do a lot of inside macro, and this has saved me from a lot of headaches. And I think that this is something that wildlife shooters will definitely appreciate as well. To me personally, after having used the Olympus OMD system for several years, as a professional photographer, as well as doing my personal projects, I think the 5-axis image stabilization is an extremely useful feature. It is a feature that I cannot live without. And I'm sure a lot of you who have experienced the effectiveness of the Olympus stabilization, I'm sure you will agree with me that when you're not using Olympus camera, it is something that you miss. I hope you have found the information I've shared about image stabilization from Olympus useful. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have more information to share about image stabilization, please leave it in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And I will definitely see you again in the next video. Until then, please go out and take more photographs. Bye-bye.